Good afternoon, everybody.
I
Say
want to.
hello.
Oh, no, no. I think
You're
I'm
going to get
drawing over
blocked
the.
permanently.
No, I want to click the confirm button because it's giving the recording dialog, but it's still drawing.
Okay, all right. So if
Uh,
you could stop beta just for a moment, please.
Now I can get rid of it. It was
Thank
drawing
you.
through the dialog box.
Okay, so
Bizarre.
today, kind of informal. I think we're going to talk about the file system a little bit with Chip and Steven. Chip was up late last night. Steven's here. He's been making a driver on top of it. And so that's still evolving a little bit. So how about if we turn to you two, fellas? Tell us about the file system.
Steven, you want to go?
I can.
So Steven's been working, he's got it all dressed up and he's made a lot of little additions and modifications to it so that it's kind of user friendly.
I got myself stuck with my Chrome window is not where I want it to be. Let me just open up another one. And then I'll be able to work on that presentation here. Keep
I've
talking.
been,
Well, while you get ready, Stephen, I just want to see if anyone has any support questions we should queue up or other sharing topics to present. If you do, you can just message me or say something or whatever.
I'll be ready in about 2 minutes.
If anybody has anything they're working on they want to talk about or any breakthroughs with the propellers. We had a pretty big inquiry from a customer this morning about adding USB support to the P2 Edge. It's the first I'd heard of that. We made lots of design choices to keep it kind of simple, but this customer really wanted USB on it.
for what purpose? To program it over or just to be able to talk to other things?
Nope, the former, he uses them in production, just wants to program them in a system over and over, you know,
Wow.
and doesn't really like the inconvenience, I guess, of the prop plug. So I asked him, well, would you still like this if it were like $10 more? How much is it worth, right?
Right.
That's really the question. Are you making 100 or are you making 10 or 1,000?
So you don't know how he feels about that.
No, it's always really good to ask and try to get a good idea. And he was definitely comparing it to the Flip because, the Flip has that. The Flip can plug into a socket and be firmly mounted.
I wonder what the
Doesn't,
extra current requirement is for having that FTDI chip on there all the time.
Mhm. Okay, I'm ready when you guys are.
okay, all you.
All right. So as Chip said, we've been working on creating a, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's
Okay.
double,
It's just black.
Okay, hold on. Something didn't work. Let me do that again. It's called things are never where you expect them to be. So sharing just goes weird. Okay. I have 12 desktops and it was on the wrong one. Okay, can you see it now?
Still black.
Still black. What the heck? Your screen sharing is paused. What the heck does that mean? Resume share. That's not doing anything. Stop share. Ah, come on. I've never had this problem before.
Well, for fun, I'll just make sure that you have some hosting ability.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's part of it. So
shouldn't be
should
it.
I don't think so. It's never been an issue in the past.
The heck? I've never had this problem before. Okay, I've got a browser here with my content. Let's make it more noticeable by changing tabs there. Okay. Do the share screen again. Okay, tell me if this is it. Now do you have a screen?
Yep.
There we go.
Finally. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, and of course, it's not what I want to show you because I changed so I could get it sharing. Let me drag it. Oh, there, out of the way. Okay. We've been working on adjusting the public interface of the Flash system. And so here's the new interface. Well, here. It's all standard think ANSI or Python file operations, and that's the new interface. And so you've got your open, your close, your rename and delete that we had before. Does the file exist? You've got file size queries. You've got seeks, writes, and reads, and then we have the specialized write types and specialized read types, including read and write string, which is our zero terminated, the Z strings. We have the directory function, stats, and strings. So all of this is on the same driver that Chip had, but now it's a new public interface. All this documentation is built in. And this, as you know, with the extension, this will all become Hover documentation as you begin working with it. But all the documentation is here. It's been changed instead of using aborts to return error codes. And we have the full catalog of error codes here. More importantly, this is all supported at this point in time by full regression tests. And so we've fully exercised the system for reads and writes. For the appends, the new circular file mechanism is fully exercised. Mounting, unmounting, flush, it's all checked with regression tests. And so at the release, all of these should be working for you just fine. Latest changes since we last talked, well, are here. And that is, we are now 127 characters plus zero terminator in the file name. And we have circular writes. I'm working on certifying the multi-cog behavior. So ultimately, that's the goal. It will work multi-cog. Also, I'll be putting a small directory layer on top of it. So you can think of this in terms of normal directory operations, even though it'll be a flat file system underneath. We'll use the path segmentation character to provide the directory simulation. Adding it to your code is easy. At the top of the repo here, you'll see Flash FS, and this is a document I was just showing you with the API information. This is the file system itself. It's a single file. Johnny Mac has contributed a terminal demo, interactive shell demo that you run with a serial terminal. And you can interact with the file system, creating, reading, writing, renaming, things like that. Thank you, Johnny Mac, for doing that. He may or may not show up today. Yeah, he's here. Okay. The other thing we did as I was doing this work, I did some, well, first of all, let's talk about how to integrate it. It's basically incorporate it. If you want to change the default from 2 files open, you can just override it here right as you incorporate it. Mounting is pretty easy. And formatting is pretty easy. So all straightforward as you would expect. Let's go look at the other thing we did is as I was doing this work, I took time to study the entire Flash file system and how we were doing it so I could document behind the scenes so we can all learn from how this is working. And so I have concept documentation here, terms, and then I talk about the actual control structure that we have in each of the blocks and the lifecycle bits and how they work. How precedence works when one block replaces the new one with subsequent writes. And then here are the 4 block shapes and the new structure. We talk about how the file is composed of blocks and how it's organized. And we talk about writing to a file, how that works, appending to an existing file. And then we reading, writing, and replacing. How circular buffer works. And then some data inside the driver, how we track things. And I show you the field pointers and stuff like this because that actually helps us iterate over the bit-sized tables that we have. And then here's the data that's stored for every open file, and then what the processes do for mounting, formatting, and looking for the next blocks to allocate. If you see anything that's not in the theory of operations that you'd like me to cover, please let me know. All of this is at the P2 Flash repo, and that looks like this. And it's available for use today. Any questions?
Well, wow, that's super awesome. You've been busy.
I have been very busy.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to Johnny Mack. He was so quiet. He wrote the terminal demo.
Oh
It'd be
yeah,
cool.
that's what we need, is some way to actually be conversant with it, because the trouble with the file system trying to develop it is you want to run all these little arbitrary checks, but it's a pain to make code every time for that. It'd be nice to have just a keyboard interface to it, kind of like DOS. John, is
John
that
always
what?
writes, yeah, can you show it, John, by chance?
Nice work, Stephen, by the way. That looks really
Oh.
great.
Oh, thank you. One of the things I felt really concerned about that we all care about is John's getting ready, is we all really want to have a stable and certified file system if we're going to start using it. And so I wanted the regression test mechanism to fully back this thing. John was kind enough as he was writing to provide a little feedback. And that actually caused me to add a few more regression tests and make sure that what he saw doesn't happen to any of the rest of us again. So that's how that'll work. If you see anything that isn't working to your expectations, talk with me. There's full issue supported repo. There's also in the Flash file system thread a new post pointing to all of this and describing the features.
Stephen, do you know how this can this can coexist with the FAT on the SD card? Like,
now, initially, I haven't worked on that. You guys were pretty unsure about our ability to detect the two mechanisms. Technically, the way this works is I can make a read-only discovery of this system. Mount is not read-only right now, and course format isn't. But it would be trivial for me to do two things. One, make a read-only check of the system. Is this system mounted anywhere in the flash space? And two, with a single block file, I can record the actual mount constraints and know where this file system lives just by inspecting the flash file system.
I think we've miscommunicated. I'm thinking of the SD card sharing the pins with the flash. There's something we have to do, like writing high or...
Yes. Chip made the advances, the changes to the driver, and those are all incorporated. Now we need some good testing now to make sure that's the case. And if anybody has a flash driver they want to recommend, I want to do the same thing with grabbing that, putting it under version control, and adding the regression test to it, so we can make sure those all working. So we can go to a single place and have known edge drivers for the RAM, for the flash, and for the micro SD.
Okay, again, I'm sorry, I maybe wasn't clear. Or
You're worried about
I'm a little dense.
micro SD and the edge work with the flash driver.
The flash driver and the micro SD are sharing the same pins,
Yes.
and they're not going to interfere with each other.
That needs to be certified. That needs to be
one of them.
certified, but it should be corrected now and ready for use in that
Yeah,
regard.
CS is held
Okay.
high every time except when we want to clock some data in or out. Then we
Okay,
dip
great.
it low and high.
Great.
That's what you're getting at?
Thank you. I think so.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
was the issue. We don't want to be accidentally sending commands into the SD card. Because the chip select for the SPI flash is the clock for the SD card, and then the chip select for the SD card is the clock for the SPI flash. That's why we have this issue.
Right.
Yeah, so we keep the clock high except when we want to clock a bit in or out, which I think someone had said that was the way to get around the problem, because we're basically then dropping chip select, but without any activity on the SD's clock pin. But this happens, well, no, chip select, the rate at which that transitions is slow. So, no, excuse me, the clock transitions quickly on the SPY flash. It's going like 40 megahertz right now. So I wonder how the SD card feels about its chip selects toggling at 40 megahertz. Does anybody know what that would do? Maybe, probably nothing, but
ideally it should do nothing, but nothing when it's not getting clocked, I don't think.
yeah.
In fact, some of them don't even realize when you release the select line without a clock. That's like an issue that they sometimes have, where you have to send down extra clocks to make sure that it realizes that you want to no longer talk to it.
Right.
Because unlike most SPI devices, the SD card, you don't actually have to ever deselect it because the commands are sort of framing themselves. You don't need the selectors or framings. You can just keep it selected, which is arguably a good idea because if it's kept selected, it won't enter into like a standby mode.
Right.
Okay, John, we're ready for you.
I have a question on this. Real quick, how many cogs does this require?
0. Only the cog that wants to do the activity, which you're calling in from, will do all the work. And there's a semaphore that will be in Stephen's version, which will gate the pub commands or pub methods, so that only one cog at a time can do anything. So if you go in there and it's not your turn yet, it'll hold until you get a turn, and then your cog does what it runs the file system software, and then it comes back out.
You're a very furious man. You understand that? No? Well, you got a lot to be furious about, and I'll tell you why. You're not well liked. You're
Just doing some muting here.
You try and say pithy things, but your wit is a hindrance, and so therefore nothing is provocative. Just mixed
Trying to
metaphors.
figure
Now,
out
does
where
that
that
make you angry?
noise is coming from. Here we are. Boom. Okay. All right, John.
Somebody watching bad YouTube.
Apparently, yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, let's hope so.
When Chip texted me last month saying, "Hey, I've got the first cut of the file system working," I asked him to send it to me so that I could put together a little test, because we've all been there. We write code, we say, "Oh, isn't this wonderful?" And then somebody else tries to use it and things show up that we didn't expect. And so what I did, because I had seen Eric made a comment in the comments about having a little shell demo, I had seen that and I thought, oh, I'm going to try to do something like that from scratch in Spin. I should actually go back and look at his C code because I could probably learn a lot from it. So this is a very simple thing. It is a kind of a quasi shell thing. The whole idea was just to experiment with features in the file system. It doesn't do everything. There are some commands that are valid within the shell. So you can see this. I should ask, is everybody seeing my editor?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So, here is the call to all the handlers that do things. But you'll see in some cases I have not implemented. And part of it is I stuck this code, the original version, out in the forums a month ago, and I haven't seen anybody kick back, hey, here's a better way to do that. So I'll just ask publicly for that now, because I'm sure that there are clever things that people could show me and others that would be beneficial long term. But I'll just go ahead and run this. And so now it started, but nothing's happened. So again, it's like a shell. Like if I type in help, it'll show the commands that are available. If I type in mount, it's now mounted. We can look at the stats from the drive. And so this is showing the size of how many files are there, how many blocks, the block size, etc. There is a kind of a non-standard feature that as I'm doing stuff for the laser tag company and working with my friend John Huffman, it turns out that, hey, there's a 64-bit serial number in all of the flash chips. So I asked Stephen to add that to the file system, and so it's there. It'll return the 64-bit unique ID of the flash, so that manufacturers like the company I work for or John can serialize products with that flash chip. But that's really it. It's just a very simple parser. If I do, and what I did, because I live in the DOS world, so we can type in dir, but I have lots of friends that are Linux fans, and I use it a little bit. So you can also type in ls. So I went through and did a bunch of DOS commands, and then I went through and found the equivalent Linux commands, just so that when people are playing with this, whatever they're comfortable with works. And so we can, if we do, since we can see the files, we can do, delete file 3 and look at it again, and now it's gone. So that's it. It's just a very, very simplistic shell. I think I have echo P2. Oops. Well,
Yeah, this is what I need.
Well, clearly I've got some problems. So let me see, as I told you, even I have, I don't know what I did. I broke something. So let me just disable this and rerun the program. Hopefully I didn't break the, I didn't kill the flash with whatever I was doing. Let me just do this. F10, F12. Okay, so mount ls. Okay, so there it is back. So Stephen, I just went, while I was getting ready, I went to the repository to get today's version, because as you know, yesterday I was having problems with this issue. I think, thank you for fixing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Let me see what I...
Also, John, if I may, at the repository, just for fun, I put in your serial number and your demo right. I put in checks to see if it was mounted and then errored out in that case with a message.
Well, and
just as a
go
little
ahead.
something to do to see if I was understanding what was happening. And I left that in the...
I'm going to ask you to pull that down really quick, because I've just found a couple of errors that clearly I didn't test everything with the new file system driver.
Okay.
So let me fix that this afternoon and we'll put it back up. But for those that are interested in doing spin programming, as Eric said, he's got a thing that works, that's in C. This is just a very simplistic parser, and what here are all of the commands that it knows. So it'll skim through this list to see if you've typed in something that's valid, and there's I have a method that will say, here's my input string, grab the first token from it, and then compare it to this list. It will then create an index from that list. If it hits this point, it's not in the list, then that method returns -1. And then with the index, we're able to just run that command. There are commands, for example, that, so here's that stats thing, which is built into Chip and Stephen's file system. So we're just running that, grabbing the data and displaying it nicely. The show files, this is the equivalent. This is what does the dir or ls. So again, here it's using the flash stats to make sure that we actually have files. If it comes back with no files or an error code, it will tell you, hey, the system's not mounted or there's no files available. Otherwise, it will iterate through and it will grab the file stuff. This is one, this is that Stephen talked about, that the file name length has changed. I ran into a problem with this yesterday too, until I went and reread the docs and saw that you need a 128-byte buffer for the file name now. Here's a case with rename, where it will, if I have a thing that requires multiple tokens. Now, again, I'm talking about this stuff, and I'm sure people like Chip and Ada and people that do parsing, hardcore stuff for language compilers are laughing at me, but I try to keep things very simple. In this particular case, it counts the tokens in the input string. If there's not 3, then it will create a problem. Otherwise, it will grab the first token and the second parameters rather, and it will do the rename. So again, really, really simple stuff. I use this kind of simple text parsing in a lot of programs. Today, I was working on a program that I need, once the Flash file system is working well, because a problem that we have not having a reliable, in my opinion, SD card driver yet for the P2 is we need a way to get files from our computers into the Flash. So I'm writing a little Python program that will communicate with a Flash programmer code that's in the P2, so I can move files from my PC into the Flash and then deal with them standalone. So it'll be something I'll use in production of a laser tag project. Long term, we'll have a nice SD driver, and we won't have to use the Flash that way anymore. I can just put the files onto the SD and run them. But again, it's a very simple program. So please, those that play with it, if you find ways or there are obvious ways that I don't know to do things better, please post an updated version in the forum so I can learn from that.
That looks great, John.
It's really simple, but it does seem to work. Now, other than, as I just embarrassingly found out, I got to kind of a critical thing where yesterday, every time I would rerun the program, the files were gone. So I reported that to Stephen because that was kind of a big deal. And I didn't get past testing all the other things. So I'll do that today so that, no later than tomorrow morning, Stephen can repost this in his repository so that other people can do it. There is a version that is in the forums, but that is connecting directly to Chip's original version. And there are differences between them. Am I right about that, Stephen? If we
Yes.
if we use Chip's original code and then use this code, we're going to run into some problems because of block structure changes.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
correct. Different file name sizes and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, John. That looks
Yeah,
great.
super, John.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
that's Just right.
John, since you and John use this in a product, can you just give us an idea how you will use the file system?
I think he's talking to you, John
Either one of you.
Hoffman. Well, at the moment, John has a product called Ultimate that is a very sophisticated camera control system. And as you can imagine, in the film and TV and video making, there's lots of things that could be happening, and people will have different pieces of gear. So John has created a system. He took advantage of my work with the next gen. In fact, a lot of the stuff that I have incorporated into my next gen drivers were working from John. We had some basics going. He and I experimented back and forth, and his product has, I think, on the order of 22 different screens, right, John? And some of those screens handle 6 or 7 parameters for a camera lens or some aspect of the code. And then you may want to, one of his customers may want to set up one of the devices and then save that to a profile and then have another camera. So if they change cameras, routinely, they can preset those and move back and forth. Right now, we're kind of doing a raw thing where I think we're using under 4K probably. I don't know. I'd have to go back. Anyway, we essentially we have a big DAT table set up, and we write it to a sector in the Flash. And then when we say save, we rewrite it. We erase that sector and rewrite everything back. So it's crude, but it's working. And this will make things much cleaner, and it will give, with some work, the ability to have named profiles in the thing. Because right now we just have 3 profiles. That's what it is, right, John? I haven't looked at that in a while. And so, it's you have 3 profiles that you can have. So that's it. But if somebody, John has some really amazing customers, and if somebody has 5 or 10 cameras they're using routinely, it would be nice to have all that stuff preset for them and then get out on set and be able to press a button and load in that particular device. In fact, we could, when this is all going, we could, in that code, we could do a directory and find out which profiles were there and then just list them. It would make it actually quite clean to have any number of parameter profiles.
And future features will have what we have working in the P1 now, but in the P2, we'll be able to record and store movements that the customer wants to do, and they can just play them back out of the flash.
Oh, that's
system.
right. Forgot about that. Yeah, we did that a long time ago. We're actually using a flash on a P1. And I very cheekily said to John, oh, there's a flash on the P2. I can learn how to use it. It'll be no problem, just like an EEPROM. And then I found out different. But even in that case, for that particular project, we just divide up the flash evenly. And so the customer, I think there was 10 different programs. That was a long time ago.
Right. Yeah.
And so we just divided the flash blocks, and so that it's kind of an even thing. And when somebody says, okay, I'm going to record program 0, we erase all of the blocks that are for program 0 and then just write to them. It works. It's, again, not as elegant as we would like it to be, but it solved the problem, and John's customer is happy.
Yep, it works
A lot
great.
easier. Going to be a lot easier now, John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that one's a P1. So, now unless John upgrades it to a P2, which would make our life a little easier, probably, but
Yeah, that's future. We're gonna upgrade him. In fact, I'd like to upgrade him into this ultimate system so that I have one platform that's serving all the customers. And then we don't have these offshoots of unique systems that we support. It'll just be one system for everybody, which is why I called it ultimate. It's the ultimate system.
Yeah, I think every bit of code I've ever written, John has played with or found a way to incorporate into his products. Other than infrared, yet. I haven't done that yet.
No. But we would like to, I don't know if this allows us to do that now, but we would like to let the customer update their firmware without having to swap the P2 Edge out and load the next gen code. I know that's coming up as a feature that I've asked John to help me with. But I don't think the splash file helps us do that yet, right, John?
No, it doesn't. This is where we really need SD card, where we could then put the, so for example, in the laser tag stuff that I do now, our P1 laser tag products, we pre-compile a binary image and for a program. So for example, just our standard laser tag rifle, it goes out with 5 programs in it. One is the editor, so you can edit, you can configure the gun for what it does, what sound effects it uses, and all those various things. There is another one that will clear out the upper 32K of the 64 by flash and then restore it to a default setting with all the names that we know in the system and the default kind of base level stuff. There is a program that I didn't create. It was created by another guy when I was working in that IT company, but it's a manager program, and this is what John's talking about. Now, the manager program allows us to send a file down to the tagger over XP and then put that file into the Propeller. So we can do over-the-air reprogramming via XP with that manager program. And then there's the referee program, and then the player itself. You know, when you play in the game, that's obviously the biggest chunk of the system is the player code. We are switching to the P2 because customers like the system and they want more features. The problem we have is occasionally we have customers that think we should be able to do on a microcontroller what the the PC, you know, gamer, you know, Call of Duty people are doing. And some of that's not realistic. But the P2 will give us more room to do more things. But long term, we're going to need to be able to download a file, put it somewhere. I guess we could put it into the flash since it's only a 0.5 meg, and then copy it to the base 0, but that would take different code. There's a file system. The file system, now I wonder if that would create a conflict. So that we had talked about that, Chip. You know, it would be really nice long term if there was the ability to copy a file from the file system into the boot area of the P2.
Oh,
And then you could reboot it. So if I
neat idea, yeah.
need to download a program, a new program, and then put it into the flash, because in the manager code, the way this guy Ilyan created that, he actually sends down a file type he calls pack, which is a package that can have multiple files in it. So we could actually send down the player code, the referee code, new manager code, new EE healers, what he calls it code. We can send them all down to one giant. Internally in the binary structure of that file, there's a header, and then the binary of the program follows that. Once he copies that all down to the SD card, and then he reopens that, and then we'll write out the individual files. It's kind of messy, but it does work. And then if we need to load in, you know, whichever program we want to run, we just copy that to the boot EEPROM and then reboot the P1, and then we're in business. It'd be nice to be able to copy a file down to the flash file system remotely, and then have a thing, you know, a command within the flash file system that says, make this my boot program.
You know, it would be, okay, the trouble with that is if we download, we don't have the security that we do with the file system, where if it gets interrupted with power loss, we could really wound up hung, right? Because we're trying to
make the actual boot program like a chain loader.
Yes,
that, like, loads the actual file.
Yes, yeah. So that's how I would do is make the boot program so that it mounts the file system and then does kind of like an auto exec or something, and then that auto exec file can be modified, and that way you get the benefit of, like, you know, this power down survival.
And that's technically that's what we're doing in the P1, because all of the programs, when you can get a request so for example, when you power up the tagger, it's normally in player mode, but if you want to switch over to the editor mode, then what it will do is you have to power down the tagger, press the black button on the tagger, and then turn the tagger on. When the tagger boots up, it looks at its inputs. If the black button is pressed and held for 2 seconds, then it says, oh, they want to switch to editor mode. And it will then run out to a little stub that will copy that file, that editor file from the SD card into the EEPROM, and then it'll reboot itself.
Is there any reason to do that over just like rebooting it directly into RAM? Because eventually you'll wear out the EEPROM. Normally they have like 1 million life cycles, but this is something.
We're not changing, you know, we're not gonna see, you know, this isn't happening every day. You know, we're normally just booting into player mode and going. In the beginning, the customer buys the taggers. If they don't get a computer system, they will end up having to manually program the taggers, or at least one, because we do have a mechanism where we're able to clone parameters from one tagger to another, but that still requires writing them to the EEPROM. There's no getting around that.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, just that one thing that I like about the Propeller and what originally sort of brought me here is that you can load a program without overwriting any sort of storage like that. You know, you
I
can just load it
understand.
directly into RAM.
I understand, but we had taggers running around in the field, and if we have a power drop and it reboots to the wrong place, it's a problem. I'll take a chance on eating an EEPROM. I don't think that's really an issue.
it won't be for your app, but there is a thing that I've been working on so that we can modify, like just random access a file so that you can go in and set the seek to anywhere you want. You can read and write data. And so you can just hit the same file offset over and over and over and rewrite that a million times, but because of the file system, it'll spread those writes out across the whole device.
Yeah.
Even though you're hitting the same file over and over.
Right. Yeah. But you're actually moving the file to a different physical location each time you rewrite it.
Yeah.
Individual blocks of it, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, that was when we did the P1 development of the laser tag back in 2015, because it was a PIC-based system from somebody else that had not nearly any of the features that we have today. That was a question is, hey, are we going to burn up this EEPROM? And I did some calculations and said, okay, if you did this process this many times a day for umpteen years, you're still not hitting that million mark. So there is, I appreciate, okay, yeah, there is a finite life cycle, but at some point you have to get to, what is the practical world actually doing with the product?
Yeah, the thing is, it wasn't necessarily about the life cycle. It's just that there's a more practical way to do it, which doesn't involve overwriting the EEPROM.
I'm going to just say I disagree. I do this stuff. I work with a company. We sell thousands of these things, and if I could just boot into RAM, if I could just load something into RAM, because then as soon as I turn off the tagger, I don't have the last thing in it. So it's not practical.
Well, yeah, if it has to survive the power down, then yes.
Well,
maybe,
of course it does. I said I'm sending a new program to the tagger. Why would it not have to save that?
Oh no, you talked about switching between different modes.
Still has to be, those modes have to be read from the EEPROM.
The write cycle life is like 100,000 on the WinBond chip. So when you get into like old EEPROMs that have high life cycles, but with the flash stuff, I think to make the design more compact or whatever, they, can only be written fewer times, but 100K is still a lot.
Yeah. Well, and especially with what you've done moving things around that. Now,
yeah.
It doesn't help that, the way John and I did that other thing. But again, that particular customer, I'm pretty sure, is setting up his animations. It's a moving target, right, John, for a shooting range?
That one is he's setting points on the rope where the camera drives to.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. And then
but it's not being programmed every day.
No. They'll record the moves, play them back. You can record up to 10 moves, play them back, and they'll use that for a week, and then they'll go set up somewhere else, and they may or may not use recorded moves there. So it's kind of hit and miss. And sometimes they'll only use 1 or 2 moves. Sometimes they'll use 5 or 6, but never all 10 of them. But we gave them enough to where they have some flexibility. But right now, if I, in the Ultimate, if I want to do a firmware upgrade, I either have to have the customer send the box back to us and we reprogram it, or we send them a P2 Edge card that they have to send back the old one. Or lastly, and the least desirable is to let them do it themselves, but then we'd have to give them, uncompiled code, which I'm not a fan of. So
you could just give them the binary and have them load it. I mean, the loading mechanism is pretty simple on the prop too. It's just, you basically just give them a text file with a bunch of, what's that called? Base 64 stuff, which is, 6 bits per byte. And they just send that, and in simplex mode, just send it over and it'll reconfigure. They would just have to plug in, they'd have to have like a prop plug, I guess, and they'd have to know what port the prop is on, but then they would just send the file over the port. And the prop 2 would deal with it.
With Propeller tool?
Well, no, you wouldn't even need that. I don't know that we have an application. I mean, Eric Smith might have something like that, or his Flex prop might incorporate, or FlexSpin might incorporate that.
Sorry, I was distracted by something else. What are we?
So John Huffman's talking about how to get code to customers. And right now, his one way he can do it is to send them a whole new P2 edge. But he doesn't want to have to give them the source code so they can use prop tool and reprogram it. But does your tool have any kind of like little ancillary programs that it runs that just take a text file and just send it over the serial port that the P2 is connected to affect a download?
Yeah, sure. There's a program called Load P2 that just loads a binary.
Load P2, okay. And does it take the binary and then generate the like base 64 code, or does it just literally send the file verbatim?
It has a whole bunch of options.
Okay.
So it can do either. There's a fast loader that sends the binary, but there's also a slow loader that.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. So that would be an option, John Huffman, is just use one of those apps, but they'd have to have a prop plug.
Okay. That's a better solution.
So
Yeah.
Chip, maybe you can comment too on any additional changes you are making to the driver
Yeah. Let me share
that
the
are
screen here.
kind of lower level, and what it means for people that are starting to use it after Johnny Mac's latest demo gets uploaded.
All right, let's see here. Where did my little green? Oh, it's over here. Hold on.
And what's that program called that Eric talked about?
Load P2.
But what is that a part of? It's a
Part of Flex prop.
Part of Flex Prop, but it's also available. I mean, it was written a long time ago by Dave Hine, I think.
Yeah.
So there's versions of it floating around.
okay.
So could we, Eric, since I helped John out, could we just write a little DOS program that we could, and send out and say, here, put this, these 2 files on your machine and press, go?
Yeah, you could use a batch file, I guess.
Okay, because it's a CLI, right, that you're calling from FlexSpin.
That's right. Yeah, from FlexSpin.
All right, so we just probably need to look at how you're doing things in FlexSpin, which is nice because you expose those things, as I recall. And so we can see if we can duplicate them. Again, it's, John's customers are filmmakers. They're not IT people or computer people like us.
Yeah, so you'd probably want to wrap it all up in a batch file or something.
Yes.
I mean, if you wanted to do it yourself, the protocol for talking to the chip is pretty straightforward.
Oh yeah, you could put something together, John.
Well, again, if Eric has a tool that he's using and everybody that's using his system, if there was a problem with it, he'd know by now and it'd have been sorted. So, if it's a good tool, we'll just we'll put a little wrapper around that to make it easier for John's customers.
Yeah, it works very good. But one problem that I think I've reported forever ago, but still hasn't been fixed, is that the error messages are kind of, it doesn't have separate error message for when there's another program that's talking to the COM port. And I've been confused by that many times. Well, ideally that shouldn't happen on just some random computer that's just not doing anything else with the COM port. So that's like the one problem.
Okay,
Also,
Chip,
sometimes
what
like
you got
takes a
here?
hot second to find it.
You asked me, Ken?
Yeah, show us what you're
Okay.
doing now to the lower level.
Okay, let me see. Hold on a sec. Okay, so we went to 127 character file names, right? Or 128, because there's a 0 terminator.
Good question. What if you create a block that has a valid CRC but no 0 terminator?
That would have like a bad file name. But remember we incorporated
No,
into
would it like overwrite half the memory or something like that?
No.
Oh, you mean if someone were to give it a file name that didn't have a 0 terminator?
If
No,
someone
because
put into the flash maliciously a file name that does not have one.
we remember how we modified the string copy so it doesn't allow infinite. That was for you. That was your input. So I used that method to copy the file name over. So it would limit it and then put a 0 terminator on it anyway.
If you
That's
use
a
the
good one.
file system, it'll truncate it. If you maliciously try to do something in there, we're just going to use whatever bytes are in there as long as the CRC was found valid. If the CRC was not valid for the block is immediately forgotten.
Yeah, it just gets chucked on remount. So this is where we used to start the file name at 04, but I added along here. So we now have like a 20-bit CRC for the file name, because since we have long file names now and we want to search through the list, like if we're looking for a file, we don't want to have to keep loading these 128-byte strings because we don't know even how long it is, right? We don't want to have to load that out of the EEPROM then, or flash, then do a compare. So what we can do now is just look at this 20-bit field and go, does the CRC match what we're looking for? If it does, then we can go and grab the file name and actually inspect it. But 20 bits gives us a million possibilities, so probably wouldn't be any, false hits. But we always check the file name anyway, just to be super sure. Whoa, and that scares me how editors do that. Hold on. Okay. So here's like a little innovation. I added another 12-bit field. So we use 20 bits of this long for the file name CRC, and then 12 bits becomes a data offset that says, where does the first data byte exist? And that being a full 11-bit range value, you can actually push it all the way into the next block where the first data byte will be considered. And the reason we do that is this allows like what my friend termed fruncation, where you want to, instead of truncate a file, you want to fruncate it from the front. And this gives us like some cool capabilities, because now we can trim files from the front or the back. And we can also use this mechanism to make rolling log files that stay a certain size. And because this is part of every head block, this rolling log file, once it's fruncated and might have a will have a non-zero value in this field, still looks like any other file to the system. So in my latest code, we don't have to like open a log file for reading and then tell it what our intended max length is. It'll just already be no more than the max length because of this mechanism here. Does that make sense? This allows us to like move around the front data byte or where the data begins in the file, because it's easy to do that on the back end. On the truncation side, you just modify, cut off a few last blocks and then change the end pointer in the remaining last block. And you can move the file end pointer anywhere you want. But now for the front of the file, we can get rid of initial blocks and then point into either the new head block, which has the data tucked into it, or if it was too much data to fit into the head block, it has to leap over to the next linked block, that's going to be below 87 where the file ends, and then it'll start the data there. So this gives us flexibility on both sides of the file, both front and back. And it just, because it's part of the file system, there's no special consideration if you're looking later, you're reading or writing a file that was a rolling log file that had limited size. Anyway, that's what's new with this. So faster file name checking and then flexible front end data start. which enables some good stuff. That's what I've been working on. And then we have this open modify, which will allow you to then, seek to anywhere in the file and just read anything, rewrite anything, and it just spreads the wear around. So you can beat up a file all day, but it won't wear down your device quickly. All right, that was what I had to share.
And then if I may, to speak how we'll get all this once Chip gets it working. Chip will release it, I'll pick it up, and then a day or two later, I'll have it integrated into the existing version of the file system, and the repo will get updated with the latest code. With respect to the circular files and his data offset that he's coming up with, circular files today work the same way. I'm just runtime calculating the data offset. It's not recorded in the file. Therefore, today, you have an open read with length for circular files. In the future, open read with length will go away. It'll just be the normal open read for circular files, and we'll just know internally that it's a circular file because of the data offset. So today you can do circular files. When you open them for read with length, they'll start you at the data offset from the length that you gave it. If you wanted to write an 8K circular, it actually amounts to 9K storage on the disk, but I'll keep track of where the last byte was. And when you read, I'll point you to the front of the 8K from 8K backwards from the end of the written data. And so you will always get that circular 8K buffer effect. So you can be logging 8K, logging 16K, logging meg, whatever you want, and it'll do it. My regression tests do logging of binary data. So 1K blocks with CRCs in them and IDs in them, so that I can prove that when I'm reading back after I seek to a block within the file and I want to read it back, I'm actually getting that block and the CRCs are valid and the IDs are valid. So the regression tests are pretty aggressive. Writing a series of longs, writing a series of bytes. I also use offsets into the file to verify that the value I wrote is what I'm getting back when seeking. So all of that is certified for you to use and should work. Chip will release the new one. I'll integrate it a couple days later. We'll see it I'll post a new version in the forum that the repo has a new version. Everybody can get that and work with it. The new version will then underpin John's demo, Johnny Mac's demo. And so everything will stay working from release to release. It will also have all the regression tests run before I release it to you guys.
That 12-bit field for the data offset, that might, wind up being a non-zero value in what's not really a circular file, because if the truncate command was run on a file, that's probably going to change to some non-zero value. But it doesn't matter because it's just kind of, internal to the file system. No one knows it's happening. But anyway, that might wind up in files just being a non-zero value because someone truncated a file without really, intending it to be a circular file. They just wanted to trim the front of it off.
Well, are there any questions for Chip, John, or Stephen of any kind?
Yeah, I have a comment I'd like to make. Since we're in the early stages of this project life cycle, would this be a good time just to look at implementing something like compressing files? In other words, zipping files or unzipping files, and build that into this system from the beginning?
That's, yeah, I've been so fascinated with like that Ziv compression thing. I've never really, I read a little bit about it, but I love the idea of compressing data. But I wonder, like, practically, how complex would it be? And would we follow? I mean, it kind of gets into a fat compatibility thing pretty quickly. If you want to move such files between systems, we might have to follow, the byte level protocol for, say, PKZip or whatever the standard is that all these files use. and it's probably a little bit overwrought for what we would need.
Well,
It's not like there really is a standard. Maybe like deflate, but deflate is not really a fast algorithm or like a good algorithm to run on like a P2. Because it has like
the data architecture knowledge and information, I believe, is public domain, especially for zip. Now, I don't know if I believe that's also true for the Linux version of all this. What is it, tar? Or I can't remember what the file command is in Linux for zipping stuff. But
well, this tar is kind of orthogonal to this. Tar is for packing multiple files into one.
Right.
And then you then compress that archive file as a separate thing.
So
yeah,
we could implement pkzip and pk, or not pk, excuse me, zip and unzip and tar and whatever the Linux command are.
Doesn't really have anything to do with the file system itself. You can just do that. You can just write the compressed data into the file.
Yeah, I would think implementing this at this time, at least by putting stubs in for the commands, might be a good idea.
Well, that's the fundamental issue here, is that it doesn't really follow the separation of concerns, right? Like the file system doesn't really need to know if the file is compressed. It just needs to store the file, and the compression happens at another step.
Right. So what I'd recommend is that if we come up with compression techniques, let's release them as compression and decompression objects. The user can then choose, I want to use this compression in my application, and they can have the file, compress it, and then hand the compressed file to the file system to be written. Same thing when they unload it.
That definitely makes sense. It's a separate orthogonal issue.
Exactly. So that it should not be part of the file system. It should be separate objects. And then as we identify and build code for the P2 that can do different compression techniques, you just pick up the compression technique you want to use, the object that represents that. And it keeps them nicely separate. You don't have to release one with the other. You just release each independently.
That's good.
Like the idea of compression if you really want to use it. But yeah, there are also special file types. Some of us use named values in our applications. And so having a text file format that supports named values like a hash is actually now a very trivial thing to put on top of our file system. And so I could actually open a file and then just, ask for a named value from the file, and voila, it works. So very fun things we can do now that we have it's a full file system. So like you can in SD cards, we can now do it on flash. We'll also be able to do that in RAM as well with the file system. For the 32 meg RAM guide, we'll have that working as well. I believe Eric already has that working on his environment.
Yeah, actually, the reason I've been distracted is that I've been porting my code to work with the new Flash FS, and I can do a directory and copy files to it, so it seems to be basically working.
Cool.
Oh yeah, when's the new version with the seeking coming out?
It's seeking is already out in the release that I released today.
Well, yeah, but I need, that's going to be a bit of a pain for me because the POSIX seek can seek in a lot of different ways. It's not always to a position in the file.
Well,
I can do it.
Yeah. Tell me what you need offline. You and I can talk, and I'll make sure we get some adjustment in there to make it easy for you.
Probably some relative seeks, right?
Yeah, there's 3 seek modes: absolute, relative, and relative to end of file. I can actually do it in my layer. I've done it for the host file system. I just have to keep track of where we are.
The file I don't think is required to actually have in there.
Oh gosh, yes. Everyone uses it to find the file size. They seek to the end of the file and then.
Yes, but it technically isn't the required feature.
Yeah, it's POSIX.
So it can be said that it's from the 3 seek modes are offset from start, offset backwards from end, and then relative.
Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
What is relative from the present position?
From the present position, yeah.
Okay, well that's pretty easy.
All of that I can do very easily in the file system. I just hadn't identified the need, so Yeah. Not hard.
I can probably do it too. As I say, I can keep track of where the file is in my layer, file system layer.
Okay, if it's something that
But other people may want to have that, you know, if they're
exactly.
writing
So,
in spin.
Eric, just send me a link of the reference you're using for the POSIX, and I'll take a look at it, and then we can. You know, it's not hard for me to put in and add a regression test to certify that it's working.
And
Right.
Stephen,
Do you have
there's
a Linux or Unix system, Stephen?
I'm a former Debian developer.
Then so the answer is definitely yes. So
Yeah.
man,
Every
Elsie,
one of my Pis, every one of my 20 plus Raspberry Pis are all running Ubuntu or Debian Linux.
Debian. Cool, that's great. Well, just man Elsie.
Okay.
That's
Got
what
it.
I use for documentation.
That works.
Stephen, there's a question in the chat from Andy.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it. He said, should we not have also a version number and a head block so you can check if a file with the same name is newer and need to be updated? It could just be 2 bytes, version.subversion. Yeah, that wouldn't be hard, I suppose. But I wonder though, what would be would there be like hard rules, or would this just be a data field that you could inspect if you wanted to see it, kind of like the serial number inside the flash device?
Chip, my expectation would be that if we ever do a destructive change to the format, like the one you're proposing now would be a fairly destructive change if you already had the file system written.
Right.
We would put a version number in there, and if we have a destructive change, what it means is that we would keep code around for the prior version that is destructive. So we could read the other block, understand the data, and then write it back out as the new format. So you'd have the ability to read in older format blocks if you ran into them. You would never write out older format blocks. So by putting in the version number, we can detect those cases internal to the file system and keep some compatibility around if people had already written their flash system with the older format.
But realistically, is that not just bloat? You could just make like a single program that converts it instead of having to always keep that branch around.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of just bringing things up to date.
I'm not sure that's what Andy's talking about. I read it as being something like VMS's file version.
Yeah, he wants to just like kind of a version awareness for the file system doesn't need to make any decisions based on it, just has to log and report it. Right?
I'd be inclined not to. I mean, you could always put it in the file name or something if you wanted to.
Yeah.
VMS kept a history of tagged the file names and made them not appear by default, but you kept version numbers every time you wrote a file, and the versions of the files were all kept around. So that was an interesting file system to play with.
Yeah, but it gets pretty complicated, I think.
Yes, it can.
And speaking of getting complicated, I think we should use what we have and get some eyes on it, get some testers, and then let some customers drive what we add so that we don't work on it forever.
Right.
And spend time with diminishing returns, because that could happen. Chip
Yes,
is very
it can.
enthusiastic.
Well, yeah, we just have to keep in mind, like, where do we cut the pie, and it's probably good to leave the file system as elemental as possible, just so it just reliably reads and writes files. And then all stuff like maybe version control or certainly file compression, decompression, that could happen at a higher level, but no need to get it maybe tangled up in the file system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just a quick summary then. Chip's gonna make a new release of the core stuff, which Stephen will incorporate, and then John will actually need to also for his testing. So he'll need to plug himself in there somewhere.
API shouldn't change, so
okay,
that should be a
nice
no-brainer for John's. I'll do the replacing the file underneath John's demo.
Hey, I have a question. I started working last night in anticipation of random access read write for files, the file has to come into being somehow so that you can, work on it. So I started working on a method last night. It seems like it's done, and it looks like it's working, but it's not. I'm not finding the file that it creates, but it's just called make file, where you just give a file name and a size, and it just, generates a file with that name. It's all empty. It's all FFs. So it doesn't, strain the flash chip at all, or not much. And then you can then have a frame in which you can go and do seeks and reads, writes, kind of like a block of memory that is a file. But I kind of think it's a good idea to have just a make file method. So that keeps someone from having to open the file and send so many bytes to it and then close it. You guys in disagreement with that, or do you think that's kind of superfluous?
I think that's useful.
Okay.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you do that, you're striping blocks across the flash system with the intent of immediately replacing all the blocks as soon as they get data. So in my mind, I'd be tempted to let us as developers write the first contents normally. And if we want to open it for read write later, it's trivial to do, and it's already a written file.
See, I thought of that, but here's the thing. Let's say most of the time when your app is running, it wants to reference this file. It just wants to be able to anytime open it up, read something out of it, change something in it, flush it or close it or whatever. So writing it is like a singularity. And I mean, initially writing it, there may not be code that just initially writes data to it, because it's going to be part of this bunch of code that expects it to exist, and it's going to work within spaces within the file. You know what I'm saying? So
I think that the challenge for you doing that, in my mind, is that we have to add a new detection for, has the data in this location ever been written? And that's a data sensitive detection.
It seems
one,
complicated. I'm not sure it's going to be used that much either. I mean,
exactly.
If I'm
writing a table that corresponds to the values read from an array of sensors I have, I'm going to write the initial values out there, my latest sense values first. I'm not going to say, I have this array of sensors, make a storage place for me, I'll add data later. I'm going to read them all and add it and write it first. In my update monitoring my system, I'm then going to add a fixed interval, or whenever I get event notifications, I'll replace the latest known values at that point. But I'll never start with an empty file of these values.
Yeah, I was thinking of a thing where, you want to just treat it like a piece of memory that you can go and access anytime. But, really, it's
I mean, I have a use case like that.
You have a use case like that?
It is, once again, the crustulator, illustrated by pig in front of it. I don't know. Because that has backup RAM. And that's basically just a piece of memory that has to be persisted into a file somehow, right?
Okay. Well, maybe there's use, but like for a lot of stuff, like what Steven's talking about, it kind of dissolves into a granularity issue. Like, you're probably going to have a file with certain data in it that you don't mind rewriting, as opposed to this weird case of like a block of memory that's fixed in size that you're going to go do things with. I mean, there's some application for that, but maybe for a lot of things that we tend to do, that wouldn't really be a thing. But for what Ada's doing, it is useful.
Yeah, it's useful. I mean, it only has to create the file like once. So it's not like that's ever an issue.
Yeah.
It's such a trivial.
On the other hand, if you add the function to do it, if you don't use it, it will just get collected away, right?
Yeah.
Well, depending on which compiler you're using, right? But yeah.
Oh yeah, the peanut still doesn't do it.
Right. So keeping this small is a good thing, and not adding more than we really need to do the job seems like a good thing, right?
Yeah, I'd see this like, maybe I'd use it as like a master parameters file that's kind of always there. But, you know, maybe that would break down practically into several different files that are, you know, per whatever the intent is. Like, maybe you wouldn't want to mix things together like that.
It seems like something we could add on top. Like,
Yeah.
could have the base file system that's sort of stable and as simple as possible, and then we can add extra features in a layer above it.
What's funny about when I was writing it, I realized that I don't need a handle to do this because I can just use, we have a 4K static block buffer that's used for things like file renaming, you know, where you have to be able to grab the old head block, change the file name CRC, rewrite it with the new life cycle that supersedes the old, and then delete the old one. So we have this 4K block that's independent of how many handles you have accommodation for.
But wouldn't that 4K block work better if it was on the stack? That's a good
I
question.
didn't want to, because everyone uses it, I didn't want to really put it on the stack.
Yeah, if you use it on multiple cogs, you kind of run into that issue, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, I can
It's
do that
normally
whole file generation without any handle or anything. I just use that block buffer and I just crank out the blank blocks and program them in, and then we're done. And it's like, no need to have ever opened a file in the normal sense. It just creates this frame. You're shaking your head, Stephen.
Only because I know how much fun it is to do those kind of things and how fun it is, how easy it is to enjoy the simplicity of it. At the same time, my internal self is pushing back, saying it's such an infrequently used thing that letting someone open a file, write it with their data, close it, and then open it for rewrite is just, it's already built into the file system as soon as we give them the read-write capability. So why add more?
Well, you know, that kind of brings up the whole matter of like being able to like selectively rewrite portions of a file. I mean, that's really only good for binary data, right? Because text data might be variable length, it might have different line lengths, and you can't just assume that something's always going to be in any place. So, but in cases like that, maybe you'd break those data sets out into different files anyway. I mean, this random access read write, I think it's good for like a file editor, like a byte level file editor, or it's good for binary data, but it's kind of useless for a lot of text stuff because things are always differently sized.
Yeah, it would be my bet, and I'm just, you know, out of the blue pulling this. It'd be my bet that the number of times we're going to operate with files on the flash is one quantity. The number of us that will actually play with read, modify, write in those files is a very small number, I'll bet. We may be logging, we're going to be writing files, we're going to be reading files. We may be staging what we read from the files by reading portions at a time.
Right.
But majority use, I don't see read, modify, write as a big thing.
No, it's like Ada said, if you wanted to have a block of binary data that's kind of like RAM, but you want it to be persistent, you could have a fixed size file that you'd want, you know, byte level read, modify, write access to. But that's kind of the only case I see. That and making a byte level file editor, you know, like a.
I mean, if you want to hate yourself, you could like use it as some sort of bizarro swap file. Because on the base edge you don't have extra RAM, right? But you have flash. You can use that as like a
We could get into
awful swap file.
A swap file, yeah. That would be tedious. That'd be slow.
Well, it seems to me that some of this I/O that we're doing with sensors into a system, like for example, reading data from an ADC, and you want to take that digital data you got from that and save it to a file. And that's time sensitive. So one clock cycle of the cog, you read it, the next time you read it again, but you're constantly trying to write it out, maybe to specific records in a file, or maybe you don't care about which record it's written to. maybe you just want to write it to the end of the file every time you write it. And you're doing that, 500 times or 1,000 times. Now, is that a real world scenario? And how often would that be done?
Yeah, that would just be appending, right? And you might want to have like some truncation going on eventually to, if you want to get rid of old stuff to keep the file size reasonable.
Right. Either that or human records in the file.
Right. Yeah, I think that byte level random access, it kind of needs to be there because there needs to be some way to do that kind of work. But
Yeah, I agree.
But it may not be something that gets used a lot. But it's kind of important for some low level kinds of reasons.
Right.
It has to be there.
Because you're going to go back later and maybe read that data to and put it in a log file. Or maybe this is the log file.
Right.
So there is that kind of application.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
that
Chip,
these systems are famous for.
Yep. And Chip in chat, we're seeing Shannon suggest that he would like to see the read, modify, write occur. So
Let's see.
Yeah, I've got oddball stuff I like to do, and I do a lot in SQLite, and I want to do a lot of without getting a database built on there, but I want to be able to hit bytes on the file system independently.
now you can do that with seeks and reads right now, but you're suggesting you'd like to be able to change those values as well.
Yes.
Okay.
In place. Yeah.
Yep.
So Shannon, oh, go ahead, Stephen.
So I was just going to say, it sounds like that we could agree that we might hit the file system feature complete at read, modify, write. And I don't, does that sound right? Let's just end there.
Wait, what was you asked a question? I didn't understand.
Oh, I said, let's get the read, modify, write support in the file system, but then add, kind of end our feature development right there and let it stabilize.
Great question.
Would
The
agree.
read,
Keep it
modify,
simple.
the read, modify, write. Is it okay to constrain that to the existing file size? Or if they go to the end, if they seek to the end of the file and start writing more data, should we grow the file?
I think it should grow the file in that case, but I don't think you should be able to seek past what the current end is.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
otherwise we might have to like blow out a bunch of space or something.
Good.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. Okay.
So we're all thinking about it the same way. I had Ada, I had said the same thing just a couple of days ago, so good to hear you think that way.
Yeah,
I think that's just like the sort of normal way that these things work. I say normal way. They keep inventing new ways to make files worse, but
totally understand. We don't need the extra complication. Our file system keeps track of utilized space, not unwritten. And so it'd be a relative nightmare to add anything else like that.
Yes, simplicity is important. I saw this, I'll post a link here. I saw this Bernard Purdy interview the other day that was really good. He's like an old drummer, and he is all about simplicity, and he understands stuff that's like just universally applicable to like any discipline. But he's talking about drumming. I'll just post it if anyone wants to see something kind of fun while you work. Let's see here. Okay, copy link address. This is really, really kind of inspiring, I thought.
Anyway, speaking of making files worse, there's been a thing going around lately with sort of weird new file APIs that have been introduced on various operating systems that have a particular flaw in common. Where if you open the file for write, it puts the write cursor at the beginning, but it doesn't delete the rest of the file, like it does in like the C F open. But these new ones, they don't do that, and there have been multiple issues with like screenshot cropping tools, where they take the screenshot, it saves the file, but then you want to crop it down, it saves the cropped file, but it forgets to delete the rest of the file that was not cropped. So you can see the rest of the file if you
Oh,
have
so
a
what we
program that
need,
can do it.
maybe we need like a truncate on close command, like a close and truncate command
No,
then.
you really
right?
just need to, if you start writing a new file, even if it already exists, you have to start it blank unless explicitly requested.
The file
Because
system-
otherwise someone will make that mistake sometime.
Yeah, we
It
already
appears to be
do that.
inevitable. That's good.
Open for write is a replace of the previous file.
Yep, that's good. I just mentioned that because people have honestly made that mistake and it's very stupid.
Hey, Shannon. So you're into like database stuff, right?
Yeah.
And the value of that is that you get to call things out through all kinds of different avenues. You get to locate data through all kinds of queries that are kind of novel and not just like having to search a file system.
Right. In my recent schemes here, I was playing with, and I appreciate the long file name letting me do this. I haven't done it on Propeller yet, but I've been experimenting with it. Where the way you might fabricate a file system just with a slash or dot delimited name, and you could pretend those are all folders. But in each section, there's a function call to read a sensor, for example, or determine the state, a function call that may look at a bunch of things, determine the state, and return a fuzzy response, a binned response of 4 different possibilities. Again and again and again, and building up this one file, but using that and sort of looking at all of these folders as columns in a truth table. And the file, the contents of the file, in this state with all of these inputs, do this. Read that file and do this. And the machine will move. You read all your sensors again. You're in a different state. Now read go down the path and find the file and do that next again and again and again. It's I've forgotten the name. Somebody building robots, kind of rebuild the same turtle-like robot. One in the 70s where everything was implemented as discrete components on cards for each of the different functions. The next time, oh, we've got microcontrollers now, I'd re-implement that. But had this storage, had this mechanism that given its inputs, its bumpers and its stall sensors on its motors, it would encounter a situation and look up what to do. And if it didn't know what to do there, it would just try something randomly until the motors stopped stalling, for example. That was kind of the negative case. Do something until you're not stalled anymore. And whatever worked, store that in that location. So you do that next time. And all these machines go out and encounter the world differently, randomly try different things, and develop personalities. So I was trying to do that sort of a structure with more sensor inputs and build it up like a giant truth table.
I see.
And that sort of stuff I'd done in SQLite database stuff. So I've just just a few weeks ago, it kind of occurred to me how I could do this more minimally.
The kind of traditional way of databases and looking for specific data in a large database file. I've got a lot of experience with Visual Fox Pro and SQL Server. They use index files in addition to the database file itself. I'm sure you've heard of that, Shannon.
Yeah.
But typically you require, if you're going to do a random seek to move your record pointer in a database file, you have to have a pre-existing index that's already established.
Yeah.
And then your seek command takes a value you want to find in the database file and uses that index file to find that record. So that's the way most databases typically work and have worked for many, many years.
Yeah, understood.
That's the other way to do it, Chip.
And that index
That's-
pointing into a location in a bigger file is kind of that wanting to be able to read and write, not change the size of strings and stuff, but I want to change that byte in that location in that file.
That's right.
Singularly.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so that's an application issue, is more than a file issue with what we've been talking about. I hope that answers your question, Chip.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Yeah, so we'll just keep the system lean and clean and kind of thin. Things could be built on top of it. Hey, Stephen.
Yes.
How many kbytes is the file system at this point of like, you know, executable code, not memory, not var code, but just, oh, you know what? It's hard to tell because you put all the data into the, instead of vars, you're using dat so that everybody can access it.
Correct. Yeah, I haven't been paying attention to it. I'm sure every time I download it, I get told, but I haven't been paying.
I think that and the program together has to be counted, because you can make a program that takes very little program but needs a lot of memory, or you can increase the size of the program but then it needs less memory, and it's all sort of the same outcome.
Anybody can load the demo into the Flash into a prop tool and get that answer pretty quickly. So odd that I don't have those statistics in front of me, but I've been a bit focused in just making sure it works. Functionality first, right?
Right. Yeah, I think we're just, once we add the random read write, I think we've got everything in there that is needful for like the base level file system.
Is there anybody that's thinking we missed anything with this new API? Thank you, John. He says it's about 28K right now.
Okay, so we know
28, that's a bit large. Oh.
Well, there's a lot of memory. So you have
the 8K of that is more than 8K of that is the storage for the 2 files.
Yeah. Okay, so it's going to be 8K plus the 4K by 12-bit. That's 6K.
That's right.
Plus half a K. Let's just say another half K, 7K. So it's going to be 15K of that is probably variables.
That makes a bit more sense.
So 13K is the code, right?
Well, sometimes on the P1 you have like 32K total for like, and you can do all sorts of things on there. So one shouldn't use the fact that there's more memory as an excuse to use more memory.
Yeah,
because then you end up at the same place again, just worse. I mean, this is what happens on the computers. All the applications now are at least 100 megabytes, maybe even a gigabyte. but they all do all the same things that they did 30 years ago. No, not 30 years ago, maybe, well, at this point, 30 years ago, maybe, but like 20 years ago, certainly.
Yeah, that kind of bloat just
Like
drives
10
me
times as
insane.
much the space.
Yeah. Needs a fast processor to push all that around.
Anyways, is the repeat n with variable thing still coming? That was the new peanut feature. Because I've added it into FlexSpin, and it'd be funny if it now didn't happen.
Well, you're talking about repeat with variable?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I have not released that, and I recoded the file system to just use repeat I from 0 to blocks -1 instead of blocks :I. Did you use the colon as the separator?
Exactly. There's some funny thing going on because there's like 3 different uses of the colon. So I had to futz around with the Lexa, but
well,
it now works.
Yeah,
at least in theory.
I think it looks. I know what it means. But I know John has really pushed that we use the word with, and Stephen thought we could use the word indexing, like repeat 16 indexing I or repeat 16 counting I.
Don't use a new word. It will break someone's variable.
Yeah. I have a solution for this whole introducing new words break stuff. In FlexSpin, any keyword that starts with a % and a letter is reserved for the compiler. And you can use, because % normally just has a 0 or 1 after it, right? Or another %.
I see what you're saying. Huh.
So you can say % with, it's fine. It's not going to conflict with anything a user did.
Right.
But then you go like %__ colon semicolon whatever, and because eventually all the namespace.
Well, the user has to type these names then, right?
The user doesn't get to use % anything except as part of the compiler. It's a keyword, so % with. So Ada, I don't think you'd ever get a %__ or whatever. I mean,
yeah, this is like the limit. I like that idea, but in practice, it gets to be that you're always typing % in front of keywords that are tied to the language, that belong to the language, right? But this is where like some slight degree of graphical dressing would make it nice that you could like imagine if you just had a color-coded block into which you'd have to put any like keyword that the system knows, so it would immediately be like, this is not a variable because it has this background or it's this color or whatever, but then kind of hide it from the user, so he doesn't see the %. He just sees like the indication that doesn't take any area on the screen, but it's denoted by like background or something. I'm always thinking about things that could be done like that, but then it's always tricky. I mean, it's very hard to beat just simple 7-bit ASCII. Like you can do everything with ASCII, but then you have you do have this problem in computing of names.
I don't think there's any issue with the colon. I mean, one of them is a variable and one of them is usually a count, and it's quite obvious which one is going to be which, because it's also sort of an extension of the normal repeat n times syntax.
Yeah, and look up, look down uses it.
Well, no, that's a different colon. That's like the second colon. Now we got a third colon.
Yeah.
There's actually, the way this works in the FlexSpin Lexa is bizarre because the parser
really ugly.
has to
and that's why colon.
know
I think
the different colons.
Yeah, I think John's right in a sense that a colon is a little bit of a bad idea.
It is.
It's just a matter of coming up with a word that doesn't conflict with anything the user.
If you look at John's suggestion, the odds of us naming any variable WITH is very low.
Yeah. With is
Actually,
like, it's not a noun and it's not a verb.
There's probably someone somewhere who's written that at some point. Probably not in Spin 2 necessarily.
I'd use with instead of the colon way before I use a colon.
I like with too. I mean, maybe we could reserve a bunch of words now, like with, to, from, or something like,
Well,
just
yeah,
pick out some keywords and say, these are reserved for the language. And
right. Everything in spin right now, the control flow spin should be reserved already, right?
well, sure, the stuff that's in there already, but it's
Right.
stuff like adding these new words that's,
Right. Yeah, field showed
But
up.
then
in
you end up with
control
words that
settings.
no one ever uses and that just exist because someone thought they might be used, but they aren't actually used. And
well, yeah.
conversely, you get you still have to find new words because you there's a new feature you want to add. Oh no, none of the reserved words work for this. Or even worse, you just repurpose one of the previously unused reserved words in a way that makes no sense.
Correct. That's yeah. There's issues with pre-allocating them. I agree with Eric in that it seems like it would be a good idea. I agree with Ada in that there are issues with doing it, and so it's
I know, so just use the colon. It makes it causes less headaches.
no. I don't. The colon doesn't teach as much when you read the code.
But like, if you read more than one of these loops, you'll know what it means. Like you don't know what anything means if you just look at it. It's like if you show someone who's never used the computer before, you show the code, they look like, what is this? You promised me $10. Why can I go home now? I miss my family. That's what they will say. I know that from experience. And like you have to just, like have to know the language to understand the language. It's very basic. I don't think there's any particular reason to use a keyword there. I mean, if you know the for loop that most languages kind of have, like that's kind of, how does that work? There's an init, there's a condition, there's an increment, and they just have semicolons in between. Like that's kind of bizarre, yet everyone seems to understand it.
Can we make it, would it be good to tentatively agree that, because I haven't released my thing with the colon in it yet. I mean, I could change it to with. Should we just tentatively agree that we'll just use with and just be done with it?
I say yes, and that takes away the third use of the colon.
And Ada, what do you say?
Well, I already
Eric,
did
Eric.
the colon thing, so I'm in favor of the colon.
Sounds like you did this
because it doesn't really
Eric.
conflict with anything in the sense that like like you can sort of tell it apart from the other colons.
Yeah, except that the parsers very well could get confused by multiple colons on the same line. Like if someone uses a question mark colon.
Yeah, but you can't put a statement after. You get a weird error message if you put something weird in, but I don't think you get
in the expression, in the repeat expression, you could have a
yeah,
colon.
I think in that you'd have to place then the question mark comes after the repeat. And I think it unsets the state after that.
It's a mess. I mean,
John's comments in chat, because we've been discussing this for a while and we kind of all agreed on with a while back.
All right, yeah, we'll use with.
We can change it. Ada, thank you. I mean, you've done the hard work already. It's just a matter of, I can add another keyword and change what you did already to use with instead of the colon. And yeah, we could make it both. I mean, in FlexProp, I guess.
Right.
If it's...
So Chip, yeah, go ahead and change it to with, and then let's get that change released.
I mean, the with is sort of more symmetrical with the other things. Like none of the other keywords have like a colon in them.
Correct.
They all have words, arguably. It's like repeat until and repeat from.
Yeah,
so it does make more sense in that sense.
I like the control flow staying pretty narrative.
The other thing is
I can have an opinion.
Is having a down count version, because normally the counting down from a number to 0 is actually the more efficient way of doing it. So if you want to have every
happen in a loop, because you just always check for 0. You don't have to remember what you're checking for. You're just going to check for 0.
Well, yeah, there's an instruction for that, you know. So But like you could turn it into like a no, you can't. Well,
Oh, the
that's a good
optimizer
question.
the flex spin optimizer already does that for you. If
It sometimes
thinks
reverses
it
the loop,
can.
but not if you actually need the index variable.
Well, yeah.
And so you have the language should sort of put you into the mind of making it very easy to change to the more efficient way. If you're just sort of setting every value in an array to some value and it doesn't really depend on the order, you want to actually do it in a down count because it's going to be faster and smaller. But if you only have a compact way of doing the up count, people are going to do the up count because they're lazy. And then the code will be bigger than it needs to be.
I guess we could say with add or with sub to explicitly say, and the default would be with add.
Or maybe like maybe just repeat from for the down count and just repeat to for the up count. That
But
also does not add a new keyword. That's important.
Yeah.
But Ada, is the down count matterful because you think it will create a more efficient loop? Or do
Yes,
you
normally,
really want to go from the end to the front for some other reason?
yeah, that's also another thing that sometimes happens. But that's
But when
of course,
it's compiled code, it is more efficient if it's
wait,
compiled.
stop this.
Decrement jump, not zero.
I mean, like if you, what I'm thinking of, this is now the best thing. If you say repeat x, just a variable, or let's just call it I, repeat I from 50, and you do not include 2, you can just imply, oh, it's going to 0. And if you repeat I to 50, it's going to imply you start at 0 and go up to 50 or something like that. Or maybe 1. I'm now getting confused. The other thing is that if you're doing a back count, you actually want to not have the number 50, right? That's another thing.
No.
You want to start at 49. That's a usual niggle that you.
Ada, one of the perspectives I look at code is I look at either future me coming back to it or other people trying to read it and understand what my intent was. Most of us are less good at recording what our intent is in and around our code. When I see repeat from and to, intent is extremely clear. Implications in code to me hide intent. And so I never want, even if a compiler has defaults, in production code, I will never defer to those defaults because I want the intent to be clear. And so when we start walking these lines,
another thing of this, like,
can we hide?
You need to know the language to understand the language. Like if it's a weird language thing that sort of isn't really confusable with anything else.
I mean, the from to, it's not that much to type actually. I mean,
it's not.
Repeat I from 0 to 49.
Yep. There's no question in your mind once you read the statement what the bounds are.
Yes, but you have to type out the bounds.
Yeah, but
good documentation.
Yeah, it's
would
good
you put it in?
Yes, but if you
in comments or would you put it in the code?
Well,
I mean,
if you see something that does a thing, then that thing will do that thing. It's like you don't have to write the program as like if you try to spell everything out in the program, it just be a giant mess.
I think
That's
this
the
matter
point of the programming language is to make the mess not happen.
Yeah, and to take the things that are most common and simplify those with the least. It's like
if you want to spell out exactly what you do, please just write your program in assembly every time, because that's the only way to actually do that. Like if you say, oh, I don't know where this variable goes. If I just declared this variable, where does it go? Oh, I don't know. It goes somewhere. No, it goes in this register. Actually, no, that's bad in Propeller assembly, because you don't actually specify what register it goes in. You just allocate one from somewhere. And it's probably going to end up somewhere. You'd actually have to use numbers to spell it out explicitly. Then you're good.
Ada, there's actually some understanding of where it goes. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the var, the dat, and the locals. So as a coder in Spin even, you have to have a minimal understanding of where things are being allocated to get the behavior that you want. And so I'm not entirely agreeing with your argument of,
I mean, it's hyperbole. I mean, I do agree that programs should be written in assembly more, because then you can sort of understand it better. I think that's a good way to understand what you're actually doing is to spell it out in instructions.
I've worked on applications where the importance of understanding was understanding the business intent, not what the computer intent was. And
I mean,
so
aren't those the same?
No, they're not the same. Not at all. Application description of what your code is and what the business intent is of your code is the dominant need for the company maintaining their understanding of how their business works. And so
Wait, I don't understand
your
how
documentation
business
has to
works.
be
I
very
it
clear.
just money just comes out of the money pipe.
Well, this is
I don't understand how it works.
yeah, this is one
Sorry.
of the dominant reasons for COBOL to have existed, right? Just lots of different reasons for thinking about documentation. So I like the staying with the clarity of describing more. So I've said this already, but I'm a fan of the width in this case.
I think that there's really no particular argument for and against. It's just a colon or a word. It's just the same thing. If it was like a weird symbol, I'd be against the weird symbol because I have like the bizarro German keyboard where all the symbols are like weird and I have to bend my fingers. Like that's the only downside to using a symbol, really.
Yeah. And if you were an APL coder and are no longer, you're very happy.
Would you guys agree that in this matter of like having an indexing variable, in 90% of the cases, it's going to be going from 0 to limit -1, right?
Actually, I mean,
I've
often
coded
it doesn't matter.
quite a few times where I use the index, and I want to count backwards, and there's some calculations and tracking stuff. I forget the particulars, but it was a pain in the neck until I realized if I do it from back to front, in time series data and calendar stuff, once I flipped it around and went from top to bottom and used the index, yeah, I do that deliberately and not infrequently.
Mm-hmm.
So you're scanning from last element to first, you're saying?
Yes. Again, it's cropped up in time series data frequently.
Yeah, I think it's
Otherwise, I was
probably
having to kind of hold a state in a buffer and then look ahead and then make a decision on what was coming in the future. And I realized if I start in the future and walk backwards, I wouldn't need those interim variables to hold state.
Oh, I see.
so it's very
Yeah.
problem context specific, and your frequency is problem context specific frequency of use. So, certainly in things I've been writing lately, it's the other way around. But I certainly agree with Shannon. I've been in situations where the other way around was much better.
Because the whole thing about using this repeat is that we're giving like a syntactic shortcut to what's hopefully the most common case. I always find myself iterating through arrays, and that's why I need this thing. And it's turns out, 0 to limit -1 is like seems to always be what I'm doing. I don't know why, but
Yeah. Certainly that's about all we saw in file system.
Yeah, that's probably the most common one up in general.
I wonder if there's anything that wouldn't be too painful that could address the backwards case. And so Shannon, you would go from limit -1 down to 0, right?
Well, I'd start at limit, but iterate, as I step in, I'm doing the minus in
Okay.
C++ stuff. And I effectively, I started 50, I put in 50 because business wise, I'm thinking, the end number, but the code, the algorithm, I decrement first. So I land on 49, I pull that out. I do the first calculation with 49.
Yeah,
Okay.
John's putting things in chat with suggestions there.
Yeah, see, the thing is, it quickly becomes not much better than like repeat, limit from, or wait, repeat I from limit to 0. I mean, is that not?
Well, again, doesn't that just speak to the efficiency that you've created already?
Yeah. I mean,
You
there's
gave
not.
us a way to do it. Why make it? It
Yeah.
works really well. We've got all directions.
I mean, I don't like
Yeah.
having to always put the -1 into the repeat loops. It's very annoying.
Oh, actually, you don't have to. Because it'll figure out what the step direction. The default step is 1, and it dynamically
No, I mean
figures
I
out.
mean the one where I go from something to limit -1, like size of the thing -1, right? That's very annoying to me at least.
Depends on if you're counting or indexing, doesn't it?
I mean, you're
Yeah.
always indexing.
Yeah. Well,
No, you're not always indexing.
and right.
You're always indexing with this thing. If you're going from 0 to something, 0 is always the first one.
I'm not actually looking for any syntactic sugar to obfuscate things, just so I can type it faster. I'm kind of with Steven on spell it out, and it documents itself better that way.
Yeah. There's actually, in the interpreter, there's actually it is like less. It's like less code is emitted, and I think it's like a little bit faster too. At least on the setup, it's faster.
You're talking about your new with form?
The way it does repeat, like variable :I or with I.
Yeah.
It is like a different bytecode that takes whatever limit is, subtracts 1 from it for the start index, or no, for the ending index. And so it does it does the -1 for you, and it does some presumptuous setup because it knows a little bit about what you want to do. So it's simpler than the general case. I mean, down at the bytecode level.
I'm having a hard time understanding why they'd be so different if the coder had specified what he wants versus you implying it.
Wait, say that again?
I'm having a hard time understanding why they'd be so different. I think the user would be causing one to occur versus your implication is causing one to occur.
Because Chip's compiler is big dumb. It just does what you write. It just literally just puts what you write into the file. It does nothing else. That's its thing.
Yeah, I mean, this was a case where I could have fewer bytecodes than would be needed if you were to type it out discretely, like repeat I from 0 to limit -1. That would generate more bytecode. If you do just repeat limit with I, it's actually smaller and faster. I don't know if it's faster. I don't think it's faster on the loop, but it's faster on the setup and takes fewer bytecodes.
It sounds like all we're missing there is some optimization opportunities.
Maybe, let's see.
Because
optimization opportunities all the way down.
But you understand what I'm saying, Ida, that the intent of the two shapes really shouldn't, in net, end up with different code.
Possibly shouldn't, but like you wrote a different language construct, it gets turned into a different bytecode. Otherwise, you'd have to do some sort of silly analysis of what you've typed, which, that's what the flex bin does to make
Yeah, I was going to say
make
that's what
every loop not into
that's
like a
what
million assembly
optimization is,
instructions.
Peter. Yeah, that's optimization. That's what it is.
Yeah, but that's not the way of the peanut. The way of the holy peanut is to take what you put in the file and then place it back out, but in a different form.
Currently,
I don't know. That's just how it is. I don't make the rules.
all right. Is there anything else we should be talking about?
I don't know. The pig has to be talked about. It's very green.
Becomes very philosophical.
It's kind of
I mean,
a lot of fun.
there's a funny joke that only works in German. I think it's in Hamlet, where the guy holds a skull and says to be or not to be. Well, in German it's sein oder nicht sein. Das ist hier die Frage. And well, the pig is kind of like a skull, right? And you can say Schwein oder nicht Schwein. Pig or not pig.
Yes.
I hope this is funny. If not, press the unfunny button to unsubscribe and dislike. Which you can't do here. You're trapped with me. We have Raymond's crusty board. It causes headaches to all involved. And by headaches, I mean it makes awful noises out of the speaker output. That actually could give you a headache, probably.
What were you working on with that board?
Just futzing around with it, basically.
Oh, okay.
I don't think I've found a fully stable setting for the memory that works in the Neo Geo emulator. I think something's just wrong with that. It's on the bottom here, that's the memory.
So you're showing
something's just wrong with that, and it works for the Mega Drive emulator, as you can see. But I don't know, something's weird about this board. It also sometimes you can get it to hard crash by unplugging and plugging the USB. It's very funny. Not today for some reason. It doesn't want to do it now. Maybe I have to. The other controller, the awful one, that one always does it in. If I can find where I've put that. Possibly I've sent it to hell for disobedience. But no, let it. Plug for the awful USB controller. You can see it running in the background. Watch what happens if I plug in this controller. Dead.
That's special.
That's anticlimactic. I've had funnier crashes before. Let's actually relaunch this exact thing just for funsies. Oh no, I have to hot plug the other one back in to make that happen. But I've had funnier crashes than this. This is amateur. So yeah, questionable quality board. Oh, it's downloading again. Possibly. It's loaded. Looks like this one in to get the thing started. Now watch. Does it do a funny crash this time when I plug it in? This is no crash. Okay. Now it's not doing it. No fair. Oh, dang it. Can't even crash a silly board with a controller that doesn't even work properly. Or maybe I've just broken the controller. No, it seems to initialize 50 times, as it usually does, because it never properly initializes this decrepit piece of plastic that's actually pretty well built, but like the Auf Wiederswein. Okay. But this is actually like the awfulest thing on the planet, and but I can't seem to get it to crash the thing now. Maybe I'll have to. Maybe I will have to gear up to the Neo Geo thing. That one's normally much more prone to having this happen to it. It's loading. Oh, mate. Takes a trillion years to do it. And then eventually we can plug and unplug the button. And eventually it will do it. Now it's not doing it. We have a name for this in German. It's called Vorführeffekt. Which is basically what you call it when you try to. Oh, now it's crashed, but it's just like hard crash. That's boring. I've had like all sorts of strange corruption occur from this. Whatever this is certainly something. It's also making weird noises from the like regulator coil. Was that the thing? I don't know. Can't hear because I have a headphone on one of my ears. But yeah, you can cause strange crashes in this P2 board by just unplugging a USB device and well, plugging it in rather. Just load something else. I don't know. Speaking of Eric, he said you can't run the thing. I thought he had the Edge board. What?
I have an Edge board. I just haven't gotten around to hooking up all the pieces that
you need one of
audio and
one of these idiots. Oh.
yeah,
possibly
I've got one somewhere in a box somewhere. I just need to pull it out.
Yeah, and of course you need to need that one. Yeah. I find these very funny. I don't know. They're funny shape. Where's the thing? I forgot what the thing even is, but there was a thing. And I forgot it. Something's making a noise. I don't even know anymore what's happening in my basement. I don't know. Just put the pig upside down. That's a solution to all my problems of forgetfulness. There was a thing I wanted to talk about just like 5 seconds ago, but like I forgot it. Maybe it's this one. You?
Oh, I was just gonna say I just pushed a bunch of source code up to the spin to CPP repo.
Oh, what is it gonna have?
It's the new flash file system. I don't have Seek implemented yet. Steven and I will probably work out the best way to do that. But it's got the same level of functionality as the old Parallax file system had in FlexSpin.
It's just new.
It's just the new format, and it can unmount now. That's a nice addition.
Yes.
So.
And Eric, I'll take care of. I sent you a direct message also. I'll take care of adding the third parameter sequence.
Thank you.
And I won't give you
Also,
any.
Speaking of, there's another
of the data
unresolved pull request. I forget what that was about.
An unresolved pull request in FlexSpin?
Yeah, there's one.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll look at it.
I think it's the one that I said maybe look at it again because I like made it after midnight, so it's like of questionable quality. I think another thing related to like memory order.
Oh, it's another optimization. I'm really reluctant to make any more optimization changes for a little bit.
But I like making them because they're so funny. But they can just pile up. It's fine.
Ada, you
Yeah,
find
it
yourself a
can
good
wait.
playground.
And
I
I
also
think this
put in
one's,
the width, so the repeat width is in
think
there.
this one is mostly one that's only enabled if you set the experimental flag. I
Yeah,
think.
I'll take a look at it, but I think I'll release this. I want to
Yeah,
do it.
just yeah, you can wait. I'm just saying, don't forget
Thank you.
about it. It will be lonely.
Thank you, Ada.
Uh, eventually, you maybe will do the other thing that I was. I forget what it was. There was another thing that was in my mind as to something that can be improved, but I forgot about it again. This happens sometimes. Just don't worry about it. Eventually, I'll remember it. Maybe if I flip the piggyback up, right side up. That didn't help at all. I blame you. It is all your fault. See, he admitted it. Anyways, I think that may actually be it. I think I've either forgotten or like don't have anything. I've been busy with other things, you know. It's hard to believe, but I actually do other things sometimes. And I don't know, sometimes they take your attention.
Yeah, Ada, I've been away from it long enough now that I'm starting to kind of really get anxious to get back to my language server process for Spin.
Oh no, the language server.
That would be nice to have.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. The working on the driver kept exposing things I'm not highlighting correctly.
Probably more fun than dealing with the language server, dealing with the file system.
Yeah, well, you know, file system is much more deterministic, but it pointed not only to things that I needed to highlight differently, but that my data structures were incomplete for trying to track what I needed to track and reference it. And as I moved to language server process, that's all going to sort itself out because it has to be organized by file. So I'm actually kind of now chomping at the bit to go in and fix those things that are annoying me.
Anyways, I actually tried adding the simple FS file systems in FlexSpin. I've actually tried adding it to like the Mega Drive emulator just for funsies, because you could have like a couple games in the flash saved, but the problem is it's like busted and like doesn't work.
The what doesn't work?
The simple FS, I never got it to work properly.
Oh, okay.
Simple FS? Which one's that?
Was it? Oh god, what was the file? Or did I misremember the name for it? Like the other one, the ARM one.
The ARM one, the little FS. Oh yeah,
little FS. Oh, it's post midnight. My intelligence rapidly deteriorates. I have to go to my coffin to sleep.
No, totally understood. That one is kind of a pig. But I did get it to work in RAM, so at least in principle.
Is it even optimized for RAM? Because it's a flash file system, right?
It is a flash file system. Yeah, it's
so it's probably not even very good at being a RAM disk. On top of the Rogers drivers, which really aren't optimal if you want to just read and write big blocks. I mean, if you read and write big blocks, it kind of doesn't matter that much. But I think I've exposited about this. If you want to expose it as a byte device like Rogers drivers do, you have to add a lot of checks before you actually start doing the request. Whereas if you just read a block that you know is going to not cross a page boundary or something, you can actually just do it directly. Well, more directly anyways. I mean, that's what all this does. This just knows that when it fetches like the 16 pixels of a sprite, it's not going to cross a boundary. So it just doesn't bother with it. It also knows that it's going to read exactly 8 bytes. So it like has hard-coded things to read exactly 8 bytes. And doesn't have to pre-compute some other stuff before doing the request. And that's how it does like millions of requests per second.
It's amazing what you did there, Ada. It's
anyways, the other thing was exactly at the little FS, it wasn't working properly. I think one of this was like a clock frequency issue. If you run it at like high clock frequencies, it crashes if you're trying to write or something.
Oh, yeah, I think Evan reported that, and I think he sent me a fix. I'm not sure.
Hopefully. Anyways, that was one problem. So if I tried to open something that wanted to create a backup RAM file, it just nope. And the other thing was that it didn't like very large files for some reason, which you kind of have to have. Like game is 4 megabytes on the flash, maybe a big one, but it
Right.
didn't really like creating that file. Like it would copy it over, but then it's just like 0 bytes actually. Fooled you.
Strange.
So I was having issues with that, and on top of that, it takes like absurd amounts of memory to actually include it into the program.
Yes.
And I have like, it's like constrained to this upper part of memory. So if you want to have both SD and flash support, you'd be looking at making it very tight up there. Well, I don't remember what the state of using the new code was for the upper code. I think it like worked, but I just didn't do it because it wasn't really necessary for the existing stuff. I don't know. I don't remember. Let's try it out together. What will happen if I
Question
build it
for
with-
both of you.
Mhm.
What micro SD flash file system are you using? Which one should I start using if I'm just going to begin to?
on the
We
micro
use-
SD?
Yes.
That's just the fat file system.
FATFS is the name of it, of the particular package we're using.
And
It's
where
the-
do
I think it's on GitHub.
Yeah, but our version has some special spicy P2 optimizations on it, I think.
Yeah, I
Just
was
for the
gonna say,
low level read, right?
does anybody have a P2 version?
Well, I
It's
think
in-
there's some other stuff like where it tries to read a some words from a structure where it has to make it C standard compliant. It kind of has to read the individual bytes and combine them. But I think I just replaced that with like a straight read. So it just does it directly. Because there's like a macro it uses to do that. So I just put like some conditionals around it, I think.
I'm looking for, has anybody done a native, something that I could build with Peanut and run for micro SD?
Yes, I have somewhere else I've made one. I think it mostly works. I think the guy with the light controller actually uses it.
Can you point me to a thread or something that has it?
Yeah, I'm already typing it.
Thank you.
Maybe this thread. I'm not sure if it's on the first post or like if it's somewhere down the current version. I don't remember. And I'm trying to figure out where the new code build script for this is.
Okay.
We don't have a build new option here, which is okay. Let us copy build comp test into build comp test new. Maybe the build options will cause it to explode. We don't know. Slash build comp test new sh. It has not yet exploded. Let's not give it an argv. Let's get this. Let's get this on full. Oh, it seems to be working on new code, so Eric can rest assured that.
Oh, good. I didn't miss pushing anything.
Well, the new code, but it works for the menu. We have to yet see what happens if I like. Well, what are they gonna load? Anything that uses multiple banks, maybe. What this used last play. Last play is just funny. It doesn't even appear to be slow. Has it even rebuilt it? That's a good question. Maybe I just messed up rebuilding it. Oh no, the compiler just crashed, and so it didn't write the new file.
The compiler crashed.
Yes, I will screen share this now because it is deeply bizarre.
It sounds unhappy.
Stack smashing detected, terminated, aborted, core dumped.
Oh, you built it with the The interpreted, the bytecode, eh?
Yeah, I
Okay.
wanted to build the interpreted mode. Yeah, yes, yes.
Oh, I haven't tried that on Mega Yumi. Is it Mega or Neo? Neo Yumi.
This is Neo Yuma. But it probably does it on both. They're like the Mega Drive one is actually the more complex one in terms of its upcode, I think, because it has like the file sorting stuff and such. Whereas the Neo Geo one, it just goes over a fixed list of games that it has. Because it needs to sort of have an individual config for each game. This is what MAME does, by the way. It has a giant XML file where all the games are configured. And we don't have XML. We have something better with a spin source file that gets included somewhere. And it has like defines like a weird bytecode format. In fact, I can show that because it's funny. So this is the silly bytecode format that defines how a game is supposed to load. Most of this is just copy paste, so it could probably be made even smaller and simpler, but whatever. So for example, for this game here, it will set char. Set char means at the current sort of cursor position in the RAM, set the characters. They're gonna come from here. Set tile mask 14 means it's gonna mask to like 14 or 15, or it's gonna 0x the bits before requesting it when it's actually running. Because on the older cartridges, they haven't invented the funky thing yet where they use some of the upper bits of the tile data that weren't really used initially as additional address bits. Like they invented that later. So the early games just put whatever into those bits, and if you don't mask it out, then it will just go like all over the place. So that's what set tile mask does. Eventually, I just start setting it on every game that has a low ROM size because it doesn't need more. And realistically, you'd have to play through the whole game to make sure that there's no place where it sets those bits to something unusable. That's what you do. Then there's load CROM. These CROMs are where the characters live. Problem is they're like interleaved because the hardware sort of wants 32 bits at a time, but no one actually makes 32-bit mask ROMs. They make 16-bit ones. But it's split it across two, so it can give you 32 bits at a time. And the funny people who like rip these two files, they just rip each chip individually, and that's why it's split across two files. And then you like read it for this size. I think that means 2 megabytes. I think 2 megabytes for these two combined, I forget. And then you do it with the other pair, and then you have do the much simpler thing for the program ROM, do the thing for the sound ROMs, do the thing for the fix ROM, do the thing for the Z80 ROM. Then you have load BIOS at the bottom here, which doesn't need any arguments because the BIOS is just sort of, we know where it is, we know where its house lives. Which is that something like /sd/neoyuma/neogeo/neoepo.bin, something like that. That's just hard-coded because I don't know, why would you put the BIOS somewhere else? That's the obvious place to put the BIOS. If you don't immediately see the BIOS and like think that's the path to put it, I don't know what to tell you. Other than like read the manual or something. Anyways, Eric, any luck on figuring out why it's smashing
No,
the
it
stack?
isn't crashing for me, but it's the output is too big. Neo Yumi the lower is overflowing its OR gauge. That's happening with
That's another good one.
That happens with 6.4.0 actually.
I'm on version 6.4.1-beta/v6.4.0-20/G9A5905. That rolls off the tongue.
Yes. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, I tried it with my head as well, but it's probably a Linux and Windows difference if it's a stack smash. My guess is we need.
I'm on Linux right now.
Oh, you're on Linux.
Yes, this is like my amazing Kubuntu installation here.
Oh.
Eventually, the stuff stopped working on Windows 7, and I don't want my computer to put ads in my computer. So I just installed Linux instead. I think a couple months ago or something like that. And
I'm
interestingly,
gonna
all the
check out
same
the
stuff runs, except for like paint.net. This accursed program just refuses to run in Wine because it uses like stupid APIs that like no one else uses. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not getting a stack smash. I even checked out the same Git commit that you have.
Do you have the same command line? That's up here. Like I've just edited my usual comp test script, which is why I enable all the funny stuff. This is like it enables all the funny stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I had put too new on too many things. Now it compiles okay for me.
Oh, you tried
you
to
have
compile the
GDB,
lower file.
it compiles the whole thing. It's okay.
Okay, so we have to like figure this out, right?
Do you have
Also, these
GDB?
ports are awful because they reset when you close the load P2. Yeah, I can GDB this. I have to just find where just copy the command. No, I want computer. Maybe I'll just have to turn off the pig feed because the camera is seriously in the way of the keyboard. And I think it's impacting my ability to. You'll see the pig again. I've had this exact pig for like over 10 years now. You will see it again.
Okay, let's see if we get the stack smash when you
Yeah, we get a
okay.
stack smash. Okay, so oh no, GDB slash build.
No, just go back, scroll back to the command line that you just had.
Yes.
And then Control A to the beginning of the line.
I pause A to the beginning, pause one,
okay.
home, whatever.
And then type GDB space minus args.
Oh, and it will automatically find the
And it'll
thing.
do all of that. Yep. And run.
Okay, run.
I don't know.
Enable debug info D for this session.
I have no idea. I've never seen that. No.
Auto down. No, just no. What? Oh.
What's the
kill implementation. Backtrace. What do we get?
New compile mull.
New compile mull.
As I say, it's not crashing on mine, although I could probably run Valgrind on it and see.
That's stack check fail. Bizarre.
Stack check fail.
Maybe you don't have. Maybe
I may not have stack checking
PCC compiles to defaults to some different options.
Yeah,
maybe I'm always compiling with options OG-G. Like I'm always building with like can you give me a different? I'm always typing like this doesn't do anything in this, but I'm always typing make J12 opt OG-G. That's always what I type in. So maybe OG enables it.
Maybe I should change my make file, I guess. I'm not. Okay, well, we should probably debug this offline. As I say, it's not happening for me, but I can try some different flags, and always Valgrind is good for catching memory, stack smashing and stuff. Although I don't see a lot of. There's not really any. There is an array of 3 items.
Yeah, what's going on in new compile mode? Do we have a? No, we don't have a. Yeah. Open repository.
Well, hey guys, I'm gonna head out. And Beta.
Yeah, it's gonna. It is all fine. No hard feelings for anyone.
No, it's good talking with you always. You know that.
Actually, does it give us a line number? No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, 1057. So it's just the end of the file.
It's the return
function.
So something in the function smashed.
Thank you. Well, I think OG disables inlining. So, or does it enable inlining, but only for things that says are inlines? I don't know.
Just before I leave, Eric, I'll have a change for you up today with the Seek stuff.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Stephen.
I'll send you an email when I get it done.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Glad
And
to.
I'll merge it.
Compose bits.
I think
Zero.
decompose bits looks very dodgy to me.
Does it? Because if
Because it's
you're passing in
calling-
shifts too, right?
It's
and then
calling
it's
itself
recursing.
again with the ampersand shifts 2.
Yes, and then it can access shifts 1, which is actually shifts 3, which doesn't
Yes.
exist.
Which doesn't exist. So something's wrong there.
I don't know the computer codes, man. I don't understand them.
I don't know where this came from. Which one of us is at fault?
Uh,
Well, we're both at fault because
Git
probably
blame.
more likely me.
Where's the Git blame? Toggle file blame. No, I just want to actually blame.
Yeah, it's my fault.
Blame
I'm sure.
someone. I have to open this in open file on remote. There we go. That's the shit. Blame. Okay, it's 7 months ago. New code optimized multiplies by shifts. It's your It's your fault.
It's my fault. Yeah.
You have destroyed the universe.
I'll take a look at it and try to figure out what's going on. Thank you, Ada.
Anyways, it's a function, and it's bad. I don't know how to say.
Yeah, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's good that you
I guess
found
you can say goodbye to the pig or something. I don't know.
Yeah, goodbye, pig. And goodbye, Ada, and
yeah,
Lachlan and Chip and Andy. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Ladies.
Lachlan, I see you checked in late. You want to talk about anything?
Want to talk about snack food speaker?
Nice.
No one wants to talk about snack food speakers.
All right.
See,
Well,
that one drained out everyone. That one just killed everyone. That's too much. If it comes to the Pringles speaker, everyone just leaves the house. It's like anti-Riz.
It's a can of bug spray or something.
Yeah, it actively causes people to want to leave, which, to be fair, is also the effect of just turning on the speaker.
Yeah. Right. All right. Well, we can get out of here. Oh man. We'll see you in a couple, like a month then.
Yeah, next month. Maybe I'll have invented something amazing and like that just makes the P2 fly around the room. Like it doesn't need anything. It's just the code that makes it levitate in the air.
Yeah, that would be good. That's the kind of app we need.
Psychokinesis in code. Yes, that's what we need.
Yeah.
But if you go insane enough, maybe you can write it.
Right. We can at least believe that we wrote it.
I mean, in that sense, perception is sort of subjective, you know. If I say I wrote the crazy psychokinesis code, maybe I did. Maybe I did it in my perception of reality, and I can sit on my P2 board and like fly around on it until it crashes, and then I don't know. I get stuck in a tree.
Yes.
Because it was flying over the forest, you know. But then this piece of shit has like, if it's like a tiny little regulator that makes weird noises.
Are they little inductors?
Yeah, it has this funny little inductor sort of setup, and like if you do the wrong thing with this, it will actually make weird noise. Interestingly, more if it's not under load because of some sort of power saving feature. If you actually put this on load, it kind of goes silent. But when it's not on a load, it go like absolutely
Oh
awful.
yeah. Hey Ada, do you know much about machine learning and all this like neural net pattern recognition kind of stuff?
Not really in sort of specifics. I only really know about it from like having watched like 5 videos at one point about like genetic algorithms and things like that, which is basically very simple. But I'm not sure what they use these days, because I don't think you can use a genetic algorithm when you have like terabytes of input data that you've stolen from the internet.
Oh yeah. It'd be cool if we had
The very fun
little,
thing
like-
that's actually, if you go look at the white paper for the Meta Llama 2 model, they say they use a data set called the pile, which in turn says it uses a data set called books free, which in turn says it's literally pirated from a pirate torrent tracker that's full of ebooks. Like they actually, well, indirectly through like 5 Fall Guys that sort of repackaged data sets, go to a pirate tracker and download ebooks to feed into the machine. And then they expect to not get sued. And somehow they seem to be getting away with it.
It'd be cool if we had like some little kind of app that could take some simple sensor data and do some kind of recognition with it, to I don't even know what, but something that would demonstrate that, something that we could make kind of flexible and
some of these newest CPUs, they actually have like some sort of machine learning built in. Not the actual like acceleration instructions. No, far more interesting. They have like a perceptron, that's the simple one, that's part of the branch predictor. So it sort of tries to learn the branch prediction pattern.
I see.
That's a very interesting one.
Yeah.
I think the main problem with all of these machine learning applications is that the system that works 99% of the time often doesn't work at all. Right? Like if you have a self-driving car or something that only gets in accidents every 100th day, right? That's not very good. Like it has to work every time.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's like when I did do the
But the problem is that it's all fuzzy logic and you can't really know why and how it works. So it will fail at random.
right.
So they have these safety drivers in there, right? So like prevent these things. The problem is if you're sitting in that car 99 days and nothing happens, you can't really stop yourself from tuning out of that. You can't just pay attention all the time. And then something happens again, and then you couldn't prevent it because you were thinking about something else.
Right.
That's kind of the main problem with these things, is that you can't really leave them unattended. It will do anything. You can't even leave them unattended with like a user, right? If you have one of these text models, you can actually do something that's very similar to like an old SQL injection.